Welcome everyone to the webinar, The Alternative to Postini, Gwava Security and Archiving. My name is Q Mangus. I'm the Director of Product Marketing and I'll be your host today. Today we've got some excellent information for you about Postini end of life and the solution Gwava provides to ensure that your organization is compliant and protected. So to begin with, I just want to ask you a few questions for you to be thinking about. We don't have to put these through in the chat or the Q&A or anything, but just things to be thinking about. If you're currently using Postini, have you been searching for an alternative? And what have you found on the market? I would suggest thinking about a solution that works for you, but that can be an all-in-one solution, meaning you shouldn't have to settle on a solution that just protects your email or just archives your email. You need something that will protect and archive all of your communications, including email, social media, and mobile. So, it's probably a mixed blessing here, or maybe a blessing in disguise, that you have to find an alternative to Postini, because the solution you find might just meet your needs better than Postini ever did. And of course, as you probably heard, Postini has been having some issues. For example, last year, Postini held legitimate emails in its spam filter for over 11 days, which delayed the delivery of those emails. Imagine what this would do for your business. So, now this webinar is going to focus on what Gwava can do for you. And I'm going to, of course, say, since this is a Gwava webinar, that Gwava is the best solution for you to use, and I suggest that you give us a try. However, if you don't go with Gwava, I would advise you to ensure that you find a solution that does more than just email. You need to be ready for current collaboration trends with social media and mobile and prepare for future collaboration trends. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the agenda for today, we're going to be discussing the Postini end of life and what you can expect, the need for archiving and security, and then what Gwava does to provide you a solution. Now, there's going to be some options for you here that are for you to migrate from Postini. So as you probably know, all Postini offerings, including Small Business Edition, Service Provider Edition, and Google Message Filtering, are no longer available. So you really have two alternatives when it comes to Gmail message archiving. You can go with Google Apps for Business and Google Vault, or you can choose a third-party solution for email security and archiving. Now with this migration, there are solutions and probably some questions. Some things that you may be asking are, what third-party solutions support Gmail? Are there any third parties that will support email security in addition to archiving? Or will we have to go with two separate vendors? Will these organizations be able to migrate my existing Google Postini archive? How quickly can a third party migrate my data? What if I have a mixed platform environment? Can they support me? And do they support content filtering, URL blocking, and archiving of all of my social media content? There are other areas of concern as well. So these are things to be thinking about when you make this migration. So then when it comes to Google Vault, well, Google Apps with Google Vault, that is an alternative that many organizations are choosing. However, there are things you need to consider with that, and we'll be going over some of the advantages and limitations of Google Vault. But one thing to really take note of is that you may face higher costs when going with Google Vault than what you have faced with Postini. Also, there's no guarantee as to where your data will be stored and who will have access to your data. So this could be a big concern for those who are in regulated industries. So as I stated before, Google Vault is the archiving solution for Google Apps. So if you are moving to Google Apps, Google Vault is a solution that is out there. And some of the things that they do is they have email and chat archiving. You can archive Gmail messages and on-the-record Google Hangout chats. You can place some legal holds to preserve emails and on-the-record chats to meet legal and other retention obligations. There's search. Of course, Google's well known for their search, so there's some good search tools. and you can export specific email messages. One thing to take note of, it is limited to MBOX format, and we'll touch on that just in a moment. And there are some audit reports as well. Vault has some reports to be able to see what different actions different users have done within the archive. And you can also grant different rights to different users as well. So if you want to have external auditors or HR come in and view the archive, you can do that. So those are some of the things that Google Vault has, so something to consider. However, there are some deficiencies when it comes to Google Vault. First of all, Google Vault archives Gmail messages and Google Hangouts only. So if you have other electronic communication, whether that be maybe another email system, or if you have social media or mobile communications, Google Vault is not the right solution for you. It only archives Gmail messages and Hangouts. So if you have other things you need to archive and you're compelled to do so with regulations or just your policies dictate that, you need to be able to you need another solution. Also, the archive data is not platform agnostic, meaning it will be difficult to move away from Gmail if and when you choose to do so. And so here on the screen you will see the top 10 deficiencies of Google Vault, and we'll talk about these a little bit more in-depthly. But just know that with these limitations, you can be at risk for compliance violation. You may not be able to produce all the information needed for litigation. There are risks when it comes to using Google Vault because of its limitations. So let's touch on a little bit here. I've hit that a little bit, but first and foremost, Google Vault does not have a unified archive, meaning it only archives Gmail messages. There's no support for social media and mobile communications. And when it comes to Google Hangouts, it does archive Google Hangouts. However, it can only archive on the record Hangouts. So if at any time a user goes and takes their Google Hangouts messages and puts them as off the record, Google Vault cannot touch those and can't archive those. Then you have some high costs, depending on what you're currently used to or what you're going to move to. Just be aware that Google Apps for Business is $5 a month per user, and Google Vault is an additional $5 per month per user. And then, of course, if you want to archive social media mobile, you'd have to have a separate solution for that. So that you can start to see that the cost can start to be something that may deter you from using them. Another thing too is that if you want to continue to store or preserve users' data in Vault, and after a user has left, you do have to pay for that. So to be able to continue to access old users' data, as you have turnover, as you have people coming and going, you have to continue to pay for them. And if you don't, you will lose their archive. So, once again, if you have a policy that dictates that you archive for a certain number of years, that can start to be quite expensive as an employee leaves, that you have to continue to pay for that. Furthermore, it's only available in the cloud. If you are in an organization where you really need to make sure you know where all your data is, say you're in a government or other regulated industry, you have no guarantee of where your data is, and it's only available in the cloud. If you want to ever have something that's on-premise or maybe a private cloud, that's not something that is offered through Google Vault. Also, another thing to take note of is that with Google Vault, there's no support for multiple email addresses per user. So if your users, which many organizations do, have multiple email addresses, there's not support for that. So me, as a worker, if I have an email address that I'm using for one department and another for another department, it's going to have to be something that's done separately. And there's an extra fee, and it cannot be seen as just my archive. Okay, let's move on here. I'm going to try and go through some more of these really quick. Okay, some other things you have a lack of archive control. I've talked about that a little bit. Is as you may know, you have no control over where your data is stored, who has access to your data, and Google won't identify the exact location of your data. This alone means that government organizations cannot use Google Vault as a viable archiving solution. When it comes to exporting, Mbox is the only format you can export with Google Vault. Most organizations prefer PDF or PSTs, and Mbox makes things difficult. So basically what happens is if you use Mbox, you have to export to an Mbox format, and then you'll have to find a way to convert it, and that's generally done with a third-party tool, so making that difficult. Speaking of Mbox, Vault cannot restore messages to the Mbox. What has to happen once again is you export to an Mbox, then you have to use a third-party vendor, pay for a third-party vendor to import that file into Gmail. So it is a very complicated process, something that can really make it difficult. Then finally, there's another thing that Vault only archives email that hits the inbox. If you have other messages, maybe in your spam folder or other locations that you want to archive, that cannot be done. Now let's talk a little bit about e-discovery. I want to touch on some of the things that Vault is lacking when it comes to e-discovery. A huge one is there's no redaction. There are no tools to redact or strike out information when a records request is made. This is huge when it comes to litigation or regulatory investigations. You need to be able to strike out or redact information that is not pertinent to the case. Then you have legal or litigation holds. There are holds, however, if an administrator deletes an account, all legal holds are gone. Of course, that account's is gone. So this can put you in a compliance violation as well, because the only way to make sure that those legal holds are in place is if you continue to pay for inactive accounts. Then that goes along with retention policies that are difficult as well. If you have inactive accounts or they're deleted, you have to continue paying for them. So once again, if you have a policy that states you have to keep something for, let's say, 7 years, you have to continue to archive those and pay for that person for those 7 years, even if they're not at your employ. Okay, and then the exporting issues that I stated before also it makes e-discovery difficult because when e-discovery is done, most organizations would like a PDF or their standard format, whereas Google Vault uses Mbox. If you'd like more information on some of the drawbacks for archiving with Google Vault, we do have a blog post about that. So if you go to gwava.com/blog/top10 Google Vault archiving drawbacks, you'll be able to read more about that. That link there is on the screen as well. So now we've talked about archiving and some of the drawbacks on moving to Google Vault for archiving. Let's touch a little bit about on why you should be protecting your network. You really need to be able to ensure that your network is protected from viruses, spam, cyber threats. There's also things that you need to protect your organization against cyberbullying, dangerous situations, inappropriate content. These are all things that you need to be aware of. And you need to put in solutions that will help guard against these situations. And we're going to talk about that as well. But just be aware, we've talked a lot about archiving. We're also going to be talking about security, and these are some of the things that you need to be aware of when it comes to security of your network. Once again, we've touched a lot about on archiving. I'm going to hit really quickly some reasons why you should be archiving. The primary drivers are for storage management, increasing performance on your systems, reducing data restore time, and allowing your end users to access the archive. Then, of course, there's also compliance and litigation reasons for that as well. Um, this here just shows you some reasons why, there's many, as I talked about compliance, there's many regulations out there that require that you archive electronic communication more than just email, as we touched about before. There's HIPAA and high-tech for healthcare. There's the Dodd-Frank Act for financial, along with SEC regulations, and FINRA is all for financial. And of course, all organizations are subject to the FRCP, which is Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, and these state that you need to be archiving all communications, whether that's email, social media, or mobile. Furthermore, the Enterprise Strategy Group found that 45% of organizations have had an e-discovery request in the past 12 months. So if you haven't had a request, you probably will. And Gartner found that 75% of global companies will have to produce messages for e-discovery by the end of this year. Furthermore, stating that you need to be prepared for that. Also, as time goes on, your volume of business data continues to grow. The rate is about 40 to 60% each year. So your volume will grow, and you need to make sure that you have a way to store that. And as that data grows, it becomes unstructured and unmanageable. About 15 to 60% actually becomes redundant and outdated. So what you need to do is get a handle on that. You need to make sure that you're archiving all your electronic communications, because if you do that, it's going to help you manage this data. It's this principle of information governance. You need to have an archive that has support for e-discovery and also structures your data. That will help ensure that you're managing the data, your storage requirements go down, and that you can find and easily locate all your electronic communication. Interestingly enough, as we talked about regulations and requirements to archive different types of electronic communication, here's an interesting graph that shows what organizations are doing. Most organizations are archiving email, but very few are archiving other things, such as instant messaging, Twitter, Facebook. You need to be doing that. And so there's huge potential for risks, and there's huge potential for you to implement solutions to make sure you get a handle on this. Finally, just to end this part of archiving, just be aware that you're probably thinking that archiving all these kinds of electronic communication may cost me money. However, not doing so could cost you a lot more money. On average, a mid-sized to larger organization will spend about $1 million over 3 years in e-discovery requests, downtime, and end-user recovery if they don't have an archiving solution. So by having one, you'll actually be saving money. There is a cost, of course, when it comes to implementing an archiving solution, especially one that supports all of these types of electronic communication. But that cost is more than made up for in what you'll save in these kinds of situations. Now, we've touched a lot about the need for archiving and why it's essential to help ensure that your organization complies with regulations. However, the point of archiving is to protect your employees and your organization. It gives you a record of what has happened, and it can help you if a situation has occurred. However, that's a reactive solution. A proactive solution would be to monitor your communications. You need to monitor what your employees are doing so that they don't ever put themselves into a situation where you have to go back and check on what has happened. Okay, so we recently surveyed a number of IT administrators, and the survey showed the top security concerns. So we're moving on a little bit to security here. Is the gullible user is number one. So issues with your users, them not doing the things that they should be doing, accessing sites that they shouldn't be, posting content that they should not be posting, visiting spoofed URLs, whatever the situation is. That is the top security concern. I would imagine that's the case for your organization. And we know that with social media growth, there are new ways to target the end user. With different apps that appear to be games, but they're actually malware. You've got these shortened URLs, which can mask a malicious URL. And then, of course, with social media, you have the chance that your employees can be posting inappropriate or malicious content on social media. So these are things to be aware of and to avoid. And you need to make sure that you are protected from current and upcoming threats and have the solutions to protect yourself from that. And some of the consequences that can happen if social media is used, and if there's unmitigated access or unfettered access to social media, there can be security breaches. Of course, there's cyber crime and cyber terrorism. There's email spoofing, there's malware phishing scams. There's so many things that can happen. So you need to make sure that you're protected, that you have a solution that protects your messaging system and your network. And we'll talk a little bit about a solution that we provide. And so let's talk now. Let's take the rest of this presentation, we have about 20 minutes left, to touch on the solution that Gwava provides for Postini customers for both archiving and security. And one thing to take note of, for those of you who are on Postini, for a limited time, we here at Gwava will migrate your archive for free. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, please contact us and we'll move you over. So on the high level, Retain solves the things that we were talking about. Retain provides you a unified archive. It provides you the ability to archive email, mobile, social media, instant messaging, and web search. As you can see, we support multiple email systems, multiple social and mobile systems. And some of the benefits to you are that it reduces legal fees and e-discovery costs. The messages are archived in an easily retrievable format. You can provide access to administrators, auditors, legal, and other teams. Another great thing is you can actually view messages in context. So if you have let's say on social media, the social media thread can be viewed in context. So if you have posts going between one user and another, it'll be reproduced in the archive. And of course, there's redaction support for e-discovery, and you can export to PDF, PST, and a standalone viewer. And also, end users have access to the archive, to their own personal archive. One key takeaway from this is that with Retain, you will extend the life of your existing hardware investment. And you will reduce server load and storage costs. And like I said, messages are archived in an easily retrievable format. And by archiving email, your email system performance and employee productivity is increased. Let's touch on each thing a little bit more in depthly. So let's talk about Gmail in particular. If you're deciding to move to Gmail or you're currently on Gmail, just be aware that by using Gmail, you can utilize Retain for the archive, and by doing so, you will have a platform-agnostic unified archive, meaning no matter what email platform is used, Retain can archive it. And unlike Google Vault, the archive is where it can only archive specific data. Retain can archive all sorts of electronic data. It can archive your email and multiple email systems. It can archive multiple social media systems. It can archive mobile, and it can archive web searches. And that's in a platform-agnostic format, so that if you ever do decide to move your email system, it's easy to do so because the archive is in a format that can be used no matter what email system you're utilizing. Another thing is you have limitless custom integration. So depending on the system you're using, you can archive it. So if you have Gmail messages that you want to archive today and then social media messages that you want to archive tomorrow, you can implement those different portions, those different modules. Then, of course, there's the full start-to-finish e-discovery tools. There are tools included with Retain to do search, perform legal holds, litigation holds. You can even export the archive to a standalone archive viewer. And what this is a subset of the archive that can be exported and given to a legal team or auditors. And this standalone archive can be accessed from any Windows machine, and it includes the capability to perform redaction and export the results to PDF. So you don't have to grant different users access to the archive if you don't want to. You can give them this standalone viewer that they can view. And then, of course, with the things I've talked about, Retain meets compliance regulations, whether that's for HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, FINRA. Retain is designed to address those needs. And you have the ability to grant rights to different users depending on what you need. And then once again, you can export to multi-formats, including PST, PDF, and the export viewer. And you can choose to implement Retain as an on-premise or a cloud archive, depending on how you'd like to do that. What's nice there is that you can have your email system in the cloud and have an archive on-prem if you choose to do so. But this is something you can easily implement, and you have options there. And finally, there's no charge for inactive users. I know I hit on that a lot. So if you do have a user that leaves your company and your policies dictate that you keep those messages for a certain amount of time, Retain will keep those for as long as you'd like. And then here, once again, Retain securely archives different email messaging platforms, including Exchange, Office 365, of course, Gmail, and GroupWise. And so if you have mixed messaging environments, Retain will archive multiple platforms. And then specifically for Retain for Google Apps, as I touched on, it securely archives Gmail messages, Gmail notes, appointments, and calendar items, iCalendar only. In fact, what's great with Retain for Gmail is that, as Gartner stated, Gwava is one of the few vendors that offers native Gmail archiving support and not through SMTP. Retain provides you a better approach to archiving Gmail. Oops, hit the wrong thing there. Okay, so here's a view of the Retain Web Access Archive Viewer. As you can see, it mimics an email system. Your folders are recreated, and all messages that are in those folders are archived. Administrators have certain functions that they can do, like place litigation holds, forward, export, restore, delete, tag. All those things administrators can do. End users can perform certain functions depending on what you grant them rights to do. Like they can restore messages directly to their own inbox. They can export if you choose to give that as well. Also, in addition to email messages, as I stated before, your appointments, attachments, calendar items are all archived in the archive as well. And these are in addition to other messages as well with social media, mobile, and web searches. Let's touch a little bit on the mobile piece. Retain Mobile securely archives at the highest level Android and BlackBerry communications. For Android, is done via an app that is on the Android phone that pulls down all the native SMS and MMS text messaging and phone call logs. And for BlackBerry, it's done through the BEZ system. And actually, BlackBerry offers this solution directly through their channel. It's called BlackBerry Audit and Archiving Service. So it's an OEM version of Retain. So if you're using BlackBerry, this is something that can be purchased directly through BlackBerry or through your BlackBerry representative. And it's, of course, it can be purchased through us as well. But we have a close relationship with BlackBerry where we've developed that solution to archive your BlackBerry messages directly through the BEZ. Now, there's another great thing, which is for iOS, we've partnered with a company called CellTrust where we actually are able to provide you a separate mobile business line, and that actually is put onto the phones through an app that CellTrust has. And with this mobile business line, it gives you a separate phone number in which a user can call, and these calls are encrypted, and you can send text messages or MMS messages, and all of those messages are encrypted, and they're logged and archived via Retain. So what's great is that now you can give your employees the ability to use iOS devices but also have a business number that they can use to call and text, and those messages are archived. And I'll show you a diagram in just a moment about how that works. But so Retain Mobile archives all these communications in one central archive that has the email, social, and mobile messaging as well. Oh, one thing to take note of too is that CellTrust app can also be deployed on Android if you wish as well. And here's just a quick view of how CellTrust works with Retain. So as a subscriber texts, it will hit the CellTrust server. All those texts are archived in Retain using the Retain collector. If a subscriber is texting or calling to another subscriber, everything is completely encrypted. Once they go outside and send something to a non-subscriber, it is encrypted up until it hits the carrier, and that applies for text messages and voice calls. But all of those are archived. Now here's a view of a search. It's essential that you can get to your archive, and so search is important. So here's a view of a search, and you can see that search brought back, which is unique to Retain, all messages, whether it was an email attachment, an appointment, a text message, a Facebook post, a pin message, a BBM message, a Twitter post. All those came across from one central search. So this is key for your organization. You need to be able to go back and search, but you may not know exactly what kind of message it is. You don't need to with Retain. You can just search and all results will come back. And then let's talk about the last piece that I want to hit on with Retain. Then we'll talk about the messaging security piece. Retain does more than archiving. It actually monitors and archives social media, instant messaging, and web searches. So the supported social media platforms are Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Yammer. For instant messaging, we support Link, Google Hangouts, Yahoo Messenger, and AOL Instant Messenger. And then for web searches, you have Google, Yahoo, Bing, Wikipedia, and YouTube. So when it comes to monitoring, what Retain Social does is it monitors any social media posts, any instant messaging posts, and web searches. So let's start with social media. If one of your employees tries to post something to, say, Facebook, and it is something that violates your policy, like you have a policy in place that they cannot be sharing any information about a project that's being worked on, you can specify the name of that project. So if an employee tries to post something about that project, it will be blocked, and it will never be posted to the web. Plus, that message will be archived in Retain so that you can see that has been done. And your employee will get a message saying that policy was blocked due to policy violation. So there are keywords that you can use to block messages, and there are built-in default terms that are based on industry standards that will also stop messages from being posted. And this is something that is mostly used on the network, but if you have employees that are remote, there is an agent for accessing it off-site as well. So what this will do is monitor messages when your employee is not on the network using this agent that can be installed on a Windows machine or Mac OS. And then there's also, as part of Retain Social, there's a corporate social media access portal, which allows your employees or other named users within teams to access your corporate social media accounts without having to log in. So what you do is that you provide the credentials for that, name the people that you want to access it, and using the Retain Social Compliance proxy, users can access those without having to log in. And then for instant messaging, I've touched on social media a little bit. Instant messaging is very similar. So if a user tries to post something on instant messaging and it violates policy, there's a pop-up that will say that prevents it, and that violates policy, and it will prevent that message from being posted, and it will be archived. One item that I just wanted to point out here is for those of you using Google Hangouts, to archive Google Hangouts, those messages do not have to be on the record. We can archive off-the-record messages because it is done via your firewall. So as messages are coming in or going out, this applies to all social media instant messaging and web searches. As messages are coming in and going out, they have to go through the firewall which then routes them through the retained social compliance proxy, which is what filters and monitors that traffic and prevents that from happening. So yes, with Google Hangouts, those messages do not have to be on the record. So here's a view of the message being blocked due to policy violation. As you can see, it looks like it's something that came from Facebook. So your users, it's a seamless experience for your users. And here's the different criteria, the text searches, pattern matching, application types, and this is where you would set up the criteria to be able to monitor and filter what is being posted. Oh, and when it comes to web search, I did fail to mention that. When somebody is searching something on the web, if it violates policy, it will stop that message from being posted, and it's archived as well. So very similar thing. Finally, just to wrap up on Retain, here are the top 10 reasons why Retain is better than the competition. I'll let you look at that here. I just want everyone to remember that Retain is a solution that we would encourage you to check out and to try out. It is something that by having a unified archive of all your electronic communication, you can ensure compliance and make sure that you can access quickly and easily the archive and view what has been archived and what has been happening in your organization. Let's move on a little bit to the messaging security piece, which is Gwava. So what Gwava does, Gwava Messaging Security, it makes sure that your email servers are secure, compliant, and productive by blocking spam before it ever reaches your system. It prevents viruses, worms, and phishing scams before they ever reach your organization. And it protects your network from cyber threats. We'll touch on some of those, of course, including spam, viruses, cybercrime, illicit images. Protects your network from DOS and DDoS attacks. And you can also filter web content. So we do have two pieces of that with Retain Social. You can filter web content, but also with Gwava, so depending on how you want to implement that. Some key features of Gwava are perimeter defense scanning. The Gwava soft appliance actually scans for spam at the perimeter and catches it before it ever reaches your system. You have outbound protection, so as you probably may be aware that a lot of spam can actually be produced within your organization and viruses. So if somebody brings in a virus so that maybe your email system is spoofed, Gwava will prevent that from going out. You have the signature engine. There's a premier anti-spam technology that's constantly updated, 0-hour protection with new spam signatures, ensuring that spam is blocked and that critical email lands in your inbox. And there's policy-based multi-tenant configuration. You can create and configure individual message policies based on the delivery information of each message. And then, of course, there's cybercrime protection. Gwava gives you multiple layers of protection to keep cybercriminals from using email as a method of attacking your infrastructure. Your users have the ability to place individual email addresses or domains on black or white lists. Moving along, there's the image analyzer, which is great. What this does is it allows for you to prevent illicit images or pornography from being for infiltrating your system. It will block those kind of images from ever entering your system. And then, of course, if there is something on your system as it's being pushed out, Gwava will prevent that from going out. So that's another part of Gwava as well, is protect from those illicit images using Image Analyzer. Some other things you can see here is you can manage everything from one central location. There's redundancy when it comes to protecting your message system, conversion tracking, email surveillance, and then multiple scanning tests as well. Here's some of the results as well. I've touched on that a lot, making sure that you don't have a security breach, you don't have cybercrime or terrorism. As we talked about earlier, the biggest threat to you is the global user. So there's it'll stop phishing scams before they reach your users. Botnet attacks are blocked. Illicit material is blocked. It stops email spoofing and prevents DNS blacklisting as well. And then when it comes to web traffic filtering with Gwava, there is URL filtering and that is done by different known malicious URLs, categorizations of URLs. You can filter URLs based on your corporate policies. And then there's also content filtering where you can prevent inappropriate communications, confidential or sensitive data, suspect information, and then other content based on your corporate policy. And then web content filtering we talked about, so the ability to block content based on policies that you set. There's some of the types of things that can be blocked. And here's a view of how easy it is to set up that monitoring. It's done via the ICAP interface, done via your firewall. You can scan inbound and outbound web traffic. And then here's an example of a message being blocked. So this is something that can be utilized via Retain, as we talked about, or it's something that can be utilized via Gwava, just depending on how best you would like to set it up and what portions of each solution you're using. Then finally, we have, as I talked about before, the DOS/DDoS protection. Gwava does protect your email system from being taken down by denial of service or distributed denial of service. So to finish up, Gwava provides you with an alternative to Postini. With Retain Unified Archiving, you have the ability to archive all of your electronic communication. And then with Gwava, you have the ability to secure your email system and your network. And so with these two solutions working in tandem, you can ensure complete protection. I'd suggest that you give us a try. Contact us at gwava.com, or visit us at gwava.com, or contact us at questions@gwava.com, or feel free to give us a call at 866-GO-GWAVA. You can also try out a free 30-day trial of this solution to see how it will work for you at gwava.com/download. Yes, so give us a chance. I know that it's something that can benefit you and your organization, and it is a great alternative to Postini. So we do have some time for some questions. If you do have some, feel free to put those through in the chat and the Q&A. It does look like we have a couple here, so I'm going to run over to those and take a look here. Okay, the first one is, can Retain monitor postings to our social media pages? So I'm assuming that this is if you have a corporate social page, if Retain can monitor that. So what Retain does is anytime an employee is accessing social media on the network, Retain will monitor and filter what they are posting. However, if you want to monitor your corporate page, there is an app that Retain Social provides to be able to monitor Facebook. So anytime somebody's posting something to Facebook that is inappropriate, or you don't want them to post, or just you want to find out what people are posting about your organization, that can be done via this Facebook app. Otherwise, to be able to see what everyone's posting, you just have to make sure that somebody within your organization accesses your corporate social account, and then once they do, Retain will pull down all those messages. So it is something that can be done. You just have to make sure that your employees are accessing your corporate page on occasion. Let's see. Can we choose what piece to archive? Meaning, can we archive email but not social media, or email and social media but not mobile? Yes. Retain can grow with you is a good way to put it. So if you're wanting to archive email today and just email, you can do that, and then you can implement the other piece to archive mobile and monitor and archive social media later on. These are pieces that you can implement as one-offs or modules. And then, okay, this one looks like it has to do with the mobile. What if a user has multiple devices? How does that work? Retain supports multiple devices per user. They're tied to a username or email, so there's no limit to the number of devices a user can have. So yes, they can have multiple devices. Okay, so how does it integrate with Gmail? So we talked about how Gartner stated that Gwava is one of the few vendors that offers native Gmail archiving and not via the SMTP. So what it does is it uses an IMAP connection to connect directly to the Gmail system, and then it pulls down the messages via that connection. Then, of course, it's tied to a user within your organization. So it actually goes directly to Gmail and not through, SMTP or scanning that message as it comes across. It's done directly through Gmail. That looks like all the questions we have for now. Thanks everyone for being on this webinar and for your interest. And once again, I encourage you to go out and learn more about us and see why Retain and Gwava is the solution and the alternative for Postini. Thanks again everyone for being here, and we hope to see you on the next one.